Wake Up in Paradise, Chapter 15. Never is a long time. 2 days later, Anne received a call from the American Embassy. The woman's voice on the phone said that she was requested to come to the embassy the following day. A time was arranged for the next afternoon. Once again, Anne dressed in her nicest clothes, despite knowing that it would not be Ryland that she was meeting. The American consulate seemed now to be in charge of her case. However, when the anxious woman entered the private office of the ambassador, Ryland rose from his seat behind the desk. He greeted Anne tersely as she crossed the room to stand uncertainly in front of him. He glanced briefly past her at the door she had just closed, motioning in the general direction of a chair. "Please have a seat," he commanded, his tone courteous but remote. That of a stranger. An embassy secretary had called her to make this appointment. What had she expected? He had not contacted her in 3 days. Ryland then proceeded to read from an open folder that was laying in front of him. "It seems that your name is Sherry Ann Osborne, 25 years of age. Last known place of residence, 531 Roosevelt Avenue, East Point, Georgia. Fifth-born child of William and Nellie Osborne, presently residing at 7769 Little Creek Road, Douglasville, Georgia." Ryland read in the same dry voice he had greeted Anne with. "There are 8 siblings," he continued, "3 brothers and 5 sisters living in other parts of the United States. You were employed for 3 years at King's Kids Daycare Center as an aide. September 7th, you went on holiday for a fortnight. You were last seen." Ryland's pencil stopped moving across the page, and he shifted his gaze across the desk at a point near the listening woman's feet. "On September 14, he resumed, "at St. Gallen Airport, you parted company with your housemate, Linda Sherwood, of the same address." Although Anne had not expected Ryland to greet her with outstretched arms, the remote expression and the detached sound of his words was evidence that the man was angry. In addition, she had also not expected him to assure her that everything was going to be all right. Nevertheless, she dared to hope that they would get back to the happy place they shared before she revealed her shameful deceit. It had been a foolish expectation, Anne now realized. Ryland would never forgive her for betraying him. She had lost her prince forever. The enormity of the situation hit the distraught young woman with so much force that she was barely conscious of Ryland's continuing words. Abject tears of denial formed in her eyes, because she did not want to believe this clinical pronouncement of another identity. With all of her heart, she wanted to stay who she was now. Nevertheless, the undeniable truth was that everything had already changed. "Is it for sure? None of them names mean anything to me," Anne questioned with denial in every fiber of her being. "Here," Ryland said, handing the folder to Anne. "Read it for yourself. It is thorough. There are pictures. There is no mistake." Opening the manila file, Anne extracted the pictures Ryland mentioned. She studied the image thoroughly. It was a standard school picture of an adolescent girl of about 14 years of age, with unruly light blonde ringlets surrounding a round face with freckles, liberally sprinkled across the nose. There was no real resemblance beyond the general coloring that matched her own. However, when she studied the girl's eyes, she knew it was the same haunting look that stared back at her each day in the bathroom mirror. With a painful knot forming in her heart, the woman, recently known as Angelina Pierce, laid the photograph aside and examined the next one. This snapshot, she assumed, was the same girl, although the girl appeared to be older. The barefoot girl in her late teens was posing on an expanse of green grass. She was dressed in dark-colored shorts and a white sleeveless shirt. The wavy hair was darker in color than the former picture, and the hair was combed tightly back on her head into a braid. Heavily lined mascara circled her eyes, and dark painted lips smiled provocatively at the camera. However, defiance and hostility was evident in her pose. Anne turned the photo over. In black hand-painted ink, it was inscribed, Sherry Osborne, June 1989, Georgia Baptist Children's Home. Following an intuition, she turned the previous photo over and looked at the printing on the back. In the small, neatly hand-printed writing, it read, Sherry Osborne, 7th grade, 1987. The other photographs in the folder were snapshots that Anne definitely could identify as herself. In one, she was with a blonde girl of her own age. The two were smiling into the camera with their arms around each other. The girl looked like Minnie that she saw every week at the hotel, slim, pretty, and dressed in attractive, fashionable clothes. However, the woman was a stranger and experienced no sense of recognition at all. The last picture that Anne examined was of a large group of children surrounded by a number of women. Small as the figures were, she was able to find herself among the women. Had Ryland been right, she wondered in dismay? Was she a mother to one of these children? She opened the folder cover with a feeling of apprehension. In the folder was a detailed account of the life as well as the family history of Sherry Ann Osborne, born July 7, 1974, in Newnan, Georgia. The names and ages, as well as the current addresses, marital status, and a number of offsprings of each of the siblings were listed. It was a chilling discovery that such a vast amount of information could be obtained in such a few days of time. Leafing through the papers quickly, Anne bypassed the family history. She was searching for the information that she wanted to know most. Was she married? Had she left children behind? There was no mention of a marriage, so by re-examining the information, she ended up reading the story in reverse. There were a number of Fulton County juvenile probation caseworker reports, a history of school truancy, as well as repeated runaways from her parents' home and various facilities she had been placed in. There were juvenile delinquency reports ranging from underage drinking, after-hours curfews, and consorting with memories of street gangs. There was also an order by the juvenile court stating that she was to be remanded to the Georgia Baptist home in Newnan, Georgia, because of the parents' inability to maintain control of her. At the age of 17, Anne was released from that facility into the care of Reverend Russell Hawker and his wife Esther. Hawker. The address was listed as the Missionary Baptist Church in East Point, Georgia. It was in that report that Anne found what she was looking for. 2 months after being placed in the Hawker family home, Cheryl Osborne disappeared. Acting on a tip, she was apprehended on March 11 in Durning, Alabama. She had married a Harvey Shippen, age 20, whom she met at the Reverend Hawker's church. The marriage was subsequently annulled on the grounds that she was a minor. And because she was underage and a ward of the state, she was returned to the custody of Reverend Hawker. Anne gave a sigh of relief to find that there had been no mention of a child. Then she focused her attention on the interviews that were documented in detail by the investigator that Ryland had put on the case. There was one with her parents and another with a roommate, Linda Sherwood. It seemed that no one was surprised that she did not return from her vacation trip to St. Goulet Island, because she had been running away from home all of her life. Anne read the report without emotion, and then she laid the file on the desk when she could no longer bring herself to read any more of it. "Have you read all this?" she asked Ryland, with a sad sigh. "Yes, several times," he answered. Ryland had not looked directly at Anne at all that she could discern. She did not blame him. His attitude made perfect sense now that she had read the whole miserable story that was her life. What a mess of existence, she thought. No wonder I did not remember any of it. Who would want to? "I'm sorry," Anne whimpered, though she could barely get the choked words audible. "You all must think I faked the whole thing to hide my past, escape into another life." She turned her back to Ryland and focused her eyes upon the many official certificates adorning the wall without actually seeing them. She was avoiding the stoic countenance of the man she loved, and that made the task of composing herself a little easier. "On the contrary, I have ascertained that you have told me the truth," Ryland remarked, the tone of his voice not as reassuring as his words. "Thank you for believing me," Anne said, turning to face him in relief. "It was my job," he replied quietly, looking into her tear-reddened eyes at last, his gaze as impersonal as his words. "Since I have treated this in a confidential matter, I can make the final judgment. I can hand the case over for possible violations investigation, or merely notify the immigration officials of your visitor status. Because of our—" He cleared his throat abruptly. "Association," he continued evenly. "I have spent several days in inquiry. I had to make sure that I am not biased." "When did this come?" Anne questioned, feeling that she had been reduced to a case in point. Their love for each other now an embarrassing association. "It was on my desk within 24 hours. I spoke at length with the Cheval family," Ryland answered briskly. "They confirm your own narrative. I have also conferred with several physicians who treat mental disorders, including what is called hysterical amnesia. They assure me that your case is not at all unusual. You will have to undergo evaluation and whatever treatment is required. Is that understood?" he commanded. In the early days on the island, Anne spent a great deal of time reading every book she could find at the library about amnesia. She knew what hysterical amnesia was. Some trauma could cause you to lose your memory, even when there was no real physical reason for the loss. Getting hit on the head in a hurricane was a definite trauma, Finding out who she really was, in Anne's opinion, was a worse one. She gave Ryland a perceptible nod. She was heartbroken to learn that he had spoken with Peta and Papa, because no one had said a word to her. In addition, she had not seen him if he visited the house. The revelation of his interaction with her host family gave Anne a feeling of isolation, as if she was a stranger on the island once again, no longer one of the Cheval family. Desolation swept over her. The man of her dreams thought by her recent deceptive behavior that she was not only a liar, but also a criminal. Maybe he is right, she decided glumly. That girl in the pictures on her lap had never been in control of her life, and it seemed she was that horrible person that spent most of her time in trouble with the law. Well, that much hadn't changed, she scolded herself vengefully. She hadn't forgotten how to keep ruining her life. Ryland wanted Anne. No, she amended the statement. He had ordered her to see a shrink. And for the first time since meeting him on that magical, flower-scented night under the stars, Anne saw the man he really was. Not the handsomest man on the island, or in the world for that matter. Not her romantic prince that held his hand out to her and swept her off her feet in a moonlight dance. Not the love of her life who could kiss her and make the world spin. Here was a man who represented the government of a world-renowned vacation resort island. He met with heads of state and often dictated law on an international level. It was evident that the woman known as Sherry Ann Osborne had always spent her life asking for trouble, because she had without hesitation fallen completely in love with the governor of St. Goulet Island brother, the minister of the interior. What could she have been thinking, she wondered. It was one thing to try and hide among the island population, or to get lost among thousands of tourists. Lord, he is the law, Anne scolded herself. Be sure your sins will find you out. Someone had told her that once. She couldn't remember who, but it didn't matter anymore. She no longer had a desire to remember anything. I beg your pardon, Ryland's voice intruded into Anne's disjointed thoughts. I'm sorry about all this mess, Anne apologized. Ryan made no response. His expression was impassive, unforgiving. What's going to happen now? She asked. I can't tell you at this moment, Ryland answered, covering his face with his open palm and rubbing the bridge of his nose. He fixed his gaze on his desk with slumped shoulders, as if he was extremely weary. Papa and Maman are not in trouble, are they? Anne persisted in concern. Ryland rose and walked around the desk to Anne. When she looked directly into his eyes, she was sorry that she had, and she flinched as if a harsh wind had hit her. There was anger in those formerly loving eyes. There was also a stronger emotion that she easily recognized. The man looked as if he hated her. Do you have any idea what kind of jeopardy you place them in? No, of course you do not, Anne, Ryland asked in a stern, autocratic tone. Then he answered his own question. Or any of the others that harbored your secret for you. Anne dropped her eyes in distress as she fidgeted with the strap of her cotton bag. It was all unnecessary, all the fabrications, turning decent people into liars like yourself. For what? He reached out and took Anne with a strong grip and then snatched the hand away, as if the mere touch of her disgusted him. I was scared, she sniffled. Of what? He retorted in disbelief. Certainly not of your friends the Chevals. Could you not have relied on their good judgment? I understand they implored you to go to the authorities. I know, she whimpered. And me. We were planning a future together, and you lied to me, not once, but over and over again. What woman does that to a man she professes to love? Anne now knew that Ryland was getting to his real anger. I don't know. I was terrified, she sobbed. Of what? He demanded. You must do better than that by way of explaining, Miss Osborne. Terrified, he snorted. With arms crossed, the man glared at the sobbing woman. His expressive eyes narrowed and ice blue. I didn't know where I was, and Peter was sweet to me. I already told you all that. I had this terrible feeling that I did something wrong, and if I went to anybody, the police or somebody, the tearful woman explained, fumbling frantically in her bag for a tissue, I'd be in big trouble. That doesn't answer about us, Ryland muttered, his tone deceptively soft. We were alone together for days, nights. Can you conceive at all how you're deliberately keeping this from me concerns me? Anne nodded mutely, with the slightest of movement of her head. What did you think would happen when I discovered the truth? Or did you think about it at all? He challenged, his voice rising in volume. I told you, didn't I? She replied. God, yes, Ryland answered with an explosive sound. He turned his back to Anne again. And what I thought would happen happened. You hate me, Anne countered, although it was getting nearly impossible to get the words past her trembling lips. She was choking so from her sobs. I don't hate you, Ryland said. The words were barely discernible, with his back turned away from Anne, but she heard them. But you don't love me any more, she responded with a tormented cry of heartbreak. I can't discuss this now, Ryland responded wearily after a lengthy silence. I find myself at a loss for any more words to say to you.